Bob Dylan hit the scene in the 60s, and in the 60s he recorded 9 albums, which showed an incredible growth of an artist. He started out as a folk singer, he became a protest singer, then he played electric music, and then he went after Americana music and country music. Quite a growth, all in a very short period of time. But Bob is just getting started. So in this episode, let's look at Bob in the 1970s. Ready? Let's drop the needle. Now, as in the previous episode, I'll only be talking about the studio albums that he released in the 1970s. And there were a lot of them. And let's watch where Bob Dylan goes. The 1970s did not start well at all for Bob Dylan. He releases a sprawling double album that he calls Self-Portrait. But there aren't his songs on it. He's covering other people's songs. And the critics did not know what to make of this. In fact, Greil Marcus of Rolling Stone actually said, "What is this shit?" Dylan said he released the album as a joke and to sort of put an end to him being called the voice of a generation. Well, it certainly did that in wonders. As I said, the critics hated it. But the album still sold well. It went to number 4 in the US and again hit number 1 in the UK. With being a double album, there's a lot of stuff here. Old chestnuts like I Forgot More Than You'll Ever Know, a cover of Gordon Lightfoot's Early Morning Rain, and then he covers Paul Simon's The Boxer and The Old Blue Moon. Okay, this is just getting weird. He also includes 4 songs recorded at the Isle of Wight Festival, the festival he chose to attend rather than the Woodstock Festival. The songs are Like a Rolling Stone, The Mighty Quinn, Quinn the Eskimo, Minstrel Boy, and She Belongs to Me. If I'm going to be kind, I'll say that this album let Bob stretch a little and defy expectations, but in reality, I think I'll stick with Greil Marcus's comment. I'm sure as a reaction to all the negative press, Dylan goes back into the studio because just 4 months later, he releases another album called New Morning. And this one, the critics all love and say it's a return to the Bob Dylan that we all know and love. The album opens with If Not For You, which George Harrison recorded a few months later for his All Things Must Pass album. Then there's The Day of the Locusts, about the time Dylan was honored at Princeton University. From the song, you can tell he didn't like it. I Like If Dogs Run Free, and I used to play this song a lot on my radio shows in LA. Side 2 starts with New Morning, which is just a great song. Then there is One More Weekend, The Man and Me, and the album closes with Bob's shortest song, Father of Night, at just 1.5 minutes long. The album hit number 7 in the US and once again went to number 1 in the UK. Like I've said, the UK really loved Bob Dylan. In 1971, Bob makes a surprise, rare live appearance at George Harrison's concert for Bangladesh. Now, George has said he wasn't even really sure that Bob would appear until he walked out on stage. Bob's next album comes out in 1973, and it's a soundtrack for a film called Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. Now, Bob actually appears in the movie, but what is most notable is that on the soundtrack there is a great Bob Dylan song, which is Knockin' on Heaven's Door. The film is not a success. In 1973, Bob's contract with Columbia has ended, so he signs a new contract with David Geffen's label, Asylum Records. But Columbia isn't done yet. Before Bob can release anything on Asylum, Columbia puts out an album of basically outtakes, which is called Dylan. And Bob had virtually no input into this record. And frankly, the less said about it, the better. But Bob couldn't really be bothered with Columbia. He was hard at work on his first album for Asylum, which he released, which is called Planet Waves, and he recruited his old friends, the Hawks, to be his backing band for it. The record starts strong with On a Night Like This. I also like Going, Going, Gone, Something There Is About You, and the great Forever Young, which appears twice on this record. The record was a hit, number 1 in the US, the first time Dylan had done that, and number 7 in the UK. Upon the release of Planet Waves, Dylan decides to take the Hawks, now called the band, and go out on a massive tour. And the tour results in a live double album called Before the Flood, which will really give you a feel about what the shows were like. And I went to that show when they played the LA Forum, and it was a tremendous evening. The band and Bob really rocked out. But Dylan was very unhappy with the promotion that Asylum gave Planet Waves, so he decided to go back to Columbia. At this time, Bob and his wife were going through a divorce, and so he literally pours his emotions onto the cuts of the next album. And the album is called Blood on the Tracks, and it's probably my favorite Bob Dylan album. It starts with one of my all-time favorite songs, Tangled Up in Blue. What a great song. No one had ever heard anything like that before. Of course, you could say the same thing about Blowing in the Wind or Like a Rolling Stone from years before. I actually spent hours learning the song to play it on my 12-string guitar, and in fact, I still play it today. I like the entire album, but I will single out Simple Twist of Fate, The Biting Idiot Wind, You're Gonna Make Me Lonesome When You Go, Meet Me in the Morning, and the great Dylan story song, Lily, Rosemary, and the Jack of Hearts. Man, this song puts you right into the Old West. Then there's Shelter from the Storm. Yes, there was a storm going on in Dylan's personal life, and it's all documented on this record. Blood on the Tracks hits #1 in the US and #4 in the UK. In 1975, Bob comes up with the idea of the Rolling Thunder Review, which will go around and play small little venues across the Northeast. And over the course, he's joined with over 100 different performers, including Joan Baez, Joni Mitchell, Roger McGuinn, and Ramblin' Jack Elliott. His next album, called Desire, comes out in 1976 while he's on tour with the Rolling Thunder Review. And boy, this is one of Bob's most story song albums. These songs tell great stories. It starts with a searing song about Reuben Hurricane Carter, framed for a murder that as a result of this song, he was finally released from prison. I also like Isis, Mozambique, Joey, Romance in Durango, and Black Diamond Bay, the harrowing story of an island being destroyed by a volcano. The album's another hit for Bob. It reaches #1 in the US and #3 in the UK, making it one of his best-selling albums. In 1978, Bob goes on a year-long tour, and I saw him when he appeared at the Universal Amphitheater in Los Angeles. Now, this tour is often referred to as his Las Vegas tour, and part of what he did was very odd. Bob actually would come down from the stage, talk to the audience, and mingle with the audience. This was certainly something that you'd never seen Bob Dylan do in any concert ever before. If you want to get a sense of what the concert tour was like, there's an album called Dylan Live at Budokan, and it covers pretty much the same songs that he played at the Universal Amphitheater. It's worth checking out. Bob's next album is called Street Legal, and it's not one of his better sounding albums because it wasn't recorded in a studio. It was actually recorded in a rehearsal space. But I like the lead off Changing of the Guards, New Pony, The Great Baby Stop Crying, Is Your Love in Vain, Senor, Tales of Yankee Power. The album did well, but it could only reach #11 in the charts, making it the first Bob Dylan album not to be in the top 10 since 1964. At the end of the 70s, in 1979, Bob stuns the world by converting to Christianity, and that's his right. But then he records 3 Christian albums. And for me, it was just weird to hear Bob Dylan pontificating about Christianity. The first Christian album is called Slow Train Comin', and Bob has said the songs are all about the end of times, as referenced in the Bible. The album includes Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits on guitar. The lead-off song has got to Serve Somebody, which was a hit, but John Lennon felt compelled to answer it with a scathing song that he wrote called Serve Yourself. Other interesting songs on the record are Precious Angels and Slow Train. I know a lot of people like this album, but frankly, I can't say that I do. And this is how Bob closes out the 1970s, and he will continue 2 more Christian albums at the start of the 1980s. And we'll talk about the 1980s in the next episode. Now, as usual, I've created a Spotify playlist, and here's the link, and I'll also put that down in the comments so you can listen to some of the songs that I've talked about in this episode. What a wild ride the 1970s turned out to be for Bob Dylan, both as a musician and as a human being. And it was a wild ride for his audience as well. We went from self-portrait to the grand success of Before the Flood to Slow Train Coming. Quite a decade. In the next episode, we'll see what happens to Bob in the 1980s. Until then, thanks for watching and keep it rockin'.
If you liked this episode, hit the like button, and you can also leave me a comment down below, and I'll respond to you. If you subscribe, we'll let you know when future episodes come out.